Invasive Mason Park frogs. This is part 1, American bullfrogs. This video is based on researching the online literature, and after many field days studying Mason Lake bullfrogs in late spring of 2026. This is number 19 of my Field Notes series. Mason Regional Park, located in Irvine, Orange County, California, is home to a small population of adult American bullfrogs. This YouTube video discusses their history and California status, as well as their life history, diet, and population ecology. The next planned video in this series will discuss another invasive Mason Lake frog, the African clawed frog. And here's the title slide of the upcoming Field Notes series, number 20, being handled by a black-crowned night heron. Here's a map you can download from the internet showing the main features of the park, including the 9-acre lake. So let's get to find out how they arrived in California. And there's a series of references I'm basing this on. All the references cited are included in the show notes. Introduced to California about 1896. Historic range is the eastern United States. Came as a human food source, probably still served in some restaurants. Introduced for biological control of insects. Accidentally introduced with fish stockings. Released by pet and aquarium trade. Used in jumping competitions, at least at the present time. The old Mark Twain essay on jumping frogs was not this species. And it could be dispersed to new areas by swimming or being carried by water flows or overland during wet times. A 2014 California Department of Fish and Wildlife document, that's online and it's free, details the negative impact of bullfrogs on California biota. And finally, in 2023, the California Fish and Wildlife Board made the determination that they approved a ban on the sale and importation of American bullfrogs. At least that was on the committee. And the Department of Fish and Game has a separate web page on the bullfrog. And again, all the references cited will be seen again on the show notes. California's invaders, American bullfrog. So it is an invasive species. An invasive species, according to AI search, on non-native plants, animals, or pathogens. It may be native to the East Coast, it's not native to California, that thrive in new environments, causing significant environmental, economic, or human health harm. Unlike merely non-native species, invasives disrupt ecosystems by outcompeting native wildlife, reducing biodiversity, and destroying habitats. And this modified quote from a scientific paper. It does not include the references cited within the original sentence, but you can find the original source there. So I want to say that introduced populations of bullfrogs have had devastating impacts on native fauna and have contributed to the local extirpation of native amphibians, snakes, and turtles in several watersheds in Southern California. Does the Mason Lake have a lot of turtles? We're going to discuss that in a little while. So let's look at some life history glimpses from Mason Lake. And I'm using a bunch of references. One of them, this very good reference, is a guide to the amphibians and reptiles of California website. I will quote from this site. Very nice site. And we find out some species statistics from the California Herbs website. This is the largest native frog inhabiting North America. They can grow up to be 8 inches long. It's mostly females. And people who see bullfrogs at Mason for the first time are just surprised at how big they are. There are male-female differences, especially with the tympanum, which is actually kind of like an outside eardrum, larger than their eyes. Those are males. Females about the same size. And they can live in the wild 8 to 10 years. That's a pretty long period of time, 8 to 10 years. Here's another reference as well from the USGS about non-indigenous aquatic species. So giving you a lot of homework if you want to follow up on this. Bullfrogs males call very loud and goes some distance. And this reference indicates that the call of a male bullfrog is a deep sonorous jurum or jugarum. I'm not quite sure it actually sounds that way, but which can be heard half a mile away or more. In the summer, males call during the day and often right after sunset, but the most intense calling happens between midnight and 3 or 4 in the morning during the breeding season. I started in Irvine to start hearing the bullfrog calls probably in early April, very late March in 2026. And frogs croak by breathing in, closing their nostrils, and then forcing air backwards and forwards between their lungs and vocal sac. So I have some bullfrog recordings here. Let's see if I can do this. I hope that came across. In terms of mating, I was fortunate to actually see on April 7th a pair in what's called amplexus. The male is on top. And I'm showing it to you here. I found this. It ended with a floating mass of eggs. How often during the breeding season would an adult female lay eggs? Since this is the only time I saw this during the spring at Mason Lake, and the only time I located surface egg mass, which I'll show you in a second. Is there only one breeding adult at the lake? I don't know. On June 12th, early morning, I saw 2 bullfrogs where only a male was usually found, and it sure looks like the lower left frog may be a female. There was no evidence that morning, that afternoon, or the next morning of any floating egg mass in this area. This area is northwest of the bridge. In fact, I think this picture is taken from the bridge at Mason Regional Park. And the eggs, older females, according to this website, this is the California Herps website, older females are capable of laying 2 clutches of eggs in a year. So maybe they'll have another clutch. If so, I might update the show notes. A female may lay as many as 20,000 eggs, it could be a lot less than that, and lose up to 27% of her body weight. And the eggs are laid in a single layer in a transparent sheet of jelly. The egg mass floats at first, then sinks to underwater vegetation just before hatching. So within 2 or 3 days, the eggs will disappear from the surface. And eggs hatch in 3 to 5 days. So this is the California Herps website. So how many actually hatch? According to this particular reference, the hatch rate for bullfrog eggs, a rough estimate is that about 1 in 50 eggs hatches into a tadpole. Amphibian life reports, but tadpoles won't all necessarily become frogs either. Just like the eggs, tadpoles are also eaten by many other animals as well, including those African clawed frogs. And so here I went back the afternoon of that mating, that amplexus, and for the next few days recorded what happened to the egg mass. So this is the afternoon of April 7th, and a close-up of the eggs on the surface. Then I went the next day in the morning, and it turned out that the male, probably the same male, was still at the site. American bullfrog males are not known to guard the eggs or tadpoles. But you can see that the egg mass has been broken up, it looks like. And a lot of it is still there on the right side. And then April 9th, I came back in the afternoon, and it looks like the egg mass has been disturbed. There's lots of movement of coots and other birds in this area. And then by April 10th, the same place, nothing on the surface. I did shoot video of the top water level and did not see any tadpoles or submerged eggs. If I have another chance for an egg mass, I'll look farther down on the water column. So let's talk about tadpoles and when they metamorphose into froglets. And I never did see active bullfrog tadpoles or froglets during the time I've been observing Mason Park wildlife. So it's really a mystery to me how the population maintains itself. And this is an AI search about where do froglets live? Where do they live? American bullfrog froglets, young frogs that have recently completed metamorphosis, live in or near permanent freshwater habitats, including ponds, lakes, marshes, and slow-moving streams. Because they are transitioning from water-breathing tadpoles to land-dwelling adults, they require shorelines with dense vegetation. They require shorelines with dense vegetation for protection and easy access to both water and land, which does not exist in Mason Lake. After metamorphosis, these young froglets exhibit a strong dispersal instinct, often traveling up to a few miles away from their birth pond across damp terrain to find their own territories and to avoid predation from older bullfrogs. Bullfrogs are cannibalistic. Let's do a section on American bullfrog behavior. And I found this thesis from San Diego State University in 2023 by Nathan Smith. He was concerned about managing the impact of invasive American bullfrogs in Southern California. So Smith says that bullfrogs are primarily nocturnal and when not calling for mates, somewhat cryptic and secretive, remaining hidden to facilitate ambush predation of their prey while avoiding other large predators. I didn't go at dark to actually see if this is true or not. I do know that the bullfrogs are usually found, it's difficult to see them because they're kind of hidden in the channels of the rock. Another thing he indicated in the thesis was that bullfrogs hibernate during the cool winter months. Bullfrogs are known to estivate, it's another term for hibernation, it's a little bit different, in burrows created both above and below the waterline, in leaf litter, and in the mud at the bottom of deep ponds, so they can get their oxygen from the water. Now, iNaturalist is a very useful source, and my question is, what's the distribution of American bullfrogs in the area around Mason Regional Park? Is it possible that bullfrogs are dispersing into Mason Park? So let's take a look at that. iNaturalist, if you don't know about it, started in 2008. It was originally a master's degree project. It became merged with the California Academy of Sciences in 2014, then joint initiative with the National Geographic Society, and in 2023, they became a separate, independent, nonprofit organization. And you can become a member of this. You can become basically a naturalist, a scientist, to help in the distribution of species. And what people do is they send in photographs, either identifying them or ask, what is this species, with specific information about the location. And there are ways of manipulating the map and this sort of thing. There are the records on the right, including their photographs. In some cases, it was audio. I'm going to look at these 76 observations. And so there's William R. Macy's Regional Park. There are actually two records on iNaturalist. The records are from 2017 and 2019. You see there's a whole cluster of bullfrog records from the San Joaquin Wildlife Sanctuary and San Joaquin Marsh. And in addition to north of Mason, right on the edge of the Rancho San Joaquin golf course, there's another record. Now what's interesting is that the record on just that says Runover Road, that's the San Diego Creek. So there was a land record. And then the record off the golf course was done the photograph was taken at night on land. So American bullfrogs can move around on land. They can disperse. If we look to the right, we don't see too much information about where they might be located. The bullfrog sightings are along the Shady Canyon and Sand Canyon drainage areas that eventually lead to the creek bed of Mason Park north of the lake. So there are possibilities for movement of bullfrogs in this area and into Mason Regional Park. Of the 7 photo submissions to the east of Mason Park, 4 were taken on land, and 2 of those were at night. Do they disperse adults? Absolutely. After this reference, the California government website says after breeding, bullfrogs tend to disperse locally from the host habitat and occupy new locations. Dispersals up to about 10,500 feet have been observed, and longer distance dispersals are suspect. And another study in a desert study I think in Arizona says unlike fish, bullfrogs travel over land. At Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge, frogs traveled as far as 2 miles from the home pond, and we found evidence suggesting that dispersal 4 to 5 miles is likely. So how visible are adult bullfrogs at Mason Regional Park? So here I am. It is April. I've certainly been hearing them, usually in the morning by the bridge, and I'm on the Mason Park Bridge looking east. Lots of red-eared sliders, as usual, basking on the rocks. But what's in the circle? That circle there. And these are this scene was taken after the next few slides. Okay, just a second. I think I see 2 eyes looking at me, or maybe not looking at me. And I'm zooming in, and there's one of the American bullfrogs. Here's where I detected adult bullfrogs in April to mid-June of 2026. I neither heard nor saw bullfrogs in the rocky areas to the west, with the question marks. The A area on this figure was the only time away from the rocks that I saw an adult bullfrog, and it was floating within a clump of surface algae near the lake edge. And I think I will show you that next. So here it is on the surface in a clump of algae located in that area A on the previous map. So suitable rocky or concrete lake edges with overhangs, narrow channels in the rocks, between rocks, might be one of the limiting factors for bullfrog populations at Mason Lake along with predator density. So what do these bullfrogs eat? They eat anything they want. It's often said that they eat anything the width of their mouth. And this is from, again, the California, Conservation Invasive Bulletin, says adult American bullfrogs have voracious appetites, and so do, by the way, the African clawed frogs. Interesting. And will eat anything they can fit into their mouths, including invertebrates, birds, bats, rodents, frogs, newts, lizards, snakes, and turtles. Bullfrog tadpoles mainly eat algae, aquatic plant material, and invertebrates, but they will also eat the tadpoles of other frog species. As a result of these feeding behaviors, all life stages of bullfrogs prey upon and are able to outcompete native frogs and other aquatic species. And as I mentioned, they're also cannibalistic. Very difficult to get rid of them. So this is a figure that I put together. I created this from published bullfrog diets and what is available at Mason Lake. Fish could be mosquito fish or green sunfish that are in Mason Lake. There may be a small population of crayfish in the lake as well. I don't know. I have no documentation on what adult bullfrogs actually eat in Mason Regional Park. But this small turtles as prey is very interesting. Turtles are another invasive species at Mason Lake. It seems to me that when you look at basking turtles, that they're very low in hatchling turtles, in small turtles. Could bullfrogs and clawed frogs be one of the reasons? Because they're eating the smaller ones? I already have a YouTube video on Mason's red-eared slider turtles. It's field notes number 7. So, can bullfrogs eat small turtles? This is an important reference here in which they summarize the literature about the decline of turtles correlated with bullfrog populations. And from that reference, they indicated that 6% of total prey items of American bullfrogs in one Canadian study were western painted turtle hatchlings, and that the western pond turtle, which is in California and is being impacted by bullfrogs, they indicated that hatchling and small juveniles of western pond turtles less than 3 years old are the most vulnerable to predation by bullfrogs. Also, the number of studies finding a correlation between bullfrog presence and a decrease in juvenile turtles suggests that bullfrogs could be a serious threat to the persistence and viability of WPT populations. So could these bullfrogs actually be responsible for the small number of hatchlings that I see? So let's look at the size of hatchlings, red-eared sliders, compared to the adult bullfrogs. Here is a basking group of red-eared sliders. They get older, they get darker. How many turtles do you see? Well, actually, there's 6. There's the 6th one, this was taken in April 2026, which is probably a hatchling from the previous fall. In September of 2025, I found a mummified specimen of a hatchling on the edge of a nearby street. It looks like there's part of a raw material embedded in the turtle. This specimen has been donated to the Mason Park collection. And there's the bottom of it. This one ran about 36 millimeters. So I know how big I think hatchlings are. To show you my hatchling specimen against an adult bullfrog, I needed the dimensions of the adult bullfrog. There is a website that shows a sketch view of the adult. I'll show you that at the bottom. So assuming their model is 6 inches, and that's conservative, right? Because they go up to 8 at Mason. It may be that Mason bullfrogs are more than 6 inches in total length. So assuming their model is 6 inches snout to vent, I calculated the width of the head at the level of the tympanum. That's about the end of the mouth corners. I then adjusted my hatchling specimen size to match my photo of the bullfrog male's head. I did all the ratios, presumably responsible for the April 7th egg laying. So with all this sort of math, here is my specimen, and how big is the bullfrog's head in relationship to it? Well, let's see. Uh-oh, there goes a hatchling down the digestive system. So yes, bullfrogs can presumably influence recruitment of the red-eared slider population in Mason. So does this bullfrog, even adults, have predators? So this is from Department of Fish and Game, California. American bullfrogs exhibit strong biological and behavioral defenses against predation. Adults and tadpoles produce a skin secretion that seems to be unpalatable to many predators, including many fish species. Secondly, the ambush predation strategy of adult bullfrogs, they don't move really much, they just sit there, reduces the amount of unnecessary movement that might otherwise gain the attention of terrestrial or avian predators. I don't know how much a role this plays in the predation of adult bullfrogs at Mason. However, they are often within sight of foraging egrets and herons. I have on 2 occasions seen a green heron not engaging an adult bullfrog, although it was visually line of sight right next to the bullfrog. And then this one here, among the animals known to eat adult bullfrogs, their tadpoles or both, are other bullfrogs. Remember, they're cannibalistic. Wading birds such as herons, river otters, not in California, turtles, water snakes, garter snakes, and giant water bugs, and fishing spiders. Apparently, bullfrog tadpoles are toxic and get too large for most fish to eat, because the sunfish might eat the tadpoles or the young turtles as well. And then the California Herb says, bullfrog tadpoles are noxious to many species of fish who eat them only as a last resort, and they're probably noxious to some reptiles, birds, and mammals. And I put together this this chart here based upon the species that are available at Mason Regional Park. I don't think I've seen adult bullfrogs being eaten in the park. I have seen one African clawed frog being eaten. So let's take a look at some past studies. But first, this idea, it's very interesting. There are 2 invasive frog species. They can eat each other. So I asked AI what happens when they're matched together, and it says, in a matchup between an American bullfrog and an African clawed frog, the outcome depends entirely on who is bigger and what species encounters the other first. Both are aggressive, opportunistic predators with voracious appetites. And this is one of the balancing acts that's going on at Mason Lake, including also the sunfish, which is an invasive species. If the bullfrog is larger, the American bullfrog will eagerly stalk, lunge at, and swallow the African clawed frog whole. If the clawed frog is larger, they're equally aggressive and will not hesitate to consume. They, meaning the clawed frog, and will not hesitate to consume a smaller bullfrog, using their claws to tear and stuff the amphibian into their mouths. I don't think it's a good life to be a small bullfrog at Mason Lake. So here on July 11th, 2025, there was an influx of terns feeding on the lake. Right now, seeing flocks of forested terns diving at the lake, possibly feeding on small fish and also tadpoles. And this particular Caspian tern, if we look closely, it looks like it's feeding on a tadpole. And it's most likely one from an American bullfrog. Here was a pied-billed grebe that was hunting in the shallows, though I've never seen tadpoles in the shallows, and got a tadpole. So I'll play this as actually a movie. Studying it for another reason, disappears out of sight, decided, well, I'll see what happens when it comes out. When it comes out, it has a tadpole. You get a chance to see that? Here's a frame. So how many adult bullfrogs are there at Mason? Well, that's an interesting question. Smith, who was dealing with large populations of bullfrogs, said calling males can be counted to estimate a minimum population density by extrapolating the ratio of calling adult males to adult females and juveniles. The largest single-site data set from the USGS bullfrog mitigation efforts produced a population ratio of 1 to 1 to 1, adult males to adult females to juveniles. The problem that I have with this is that I've heard calling bullfrogs from 4 locations at Mason Lake during a short period of days. That would mean there should be 12 of them. 4 males, 4 females, 4 juveniles. But I've not yet seen juvenile bullfrogs around Mason Lake. They probably, if they even existed, probably get eaten by either frog species. And I've only seen 1 bullfrog egg mass during my study from April 7th to the middle of June, although male bullfrogs were calling during that period, although much less frequently now. I started following the bullfrogs about a week after they started calling in early April and observed the Rocky Lake edge most early mornings and some afternoons. So I didn't see, I'm wondering, is there only a single female here? Adult female. So my estimate is that adult bullfrog populations at Mason Regional Park consist of only 6 or fewer individuals, mostly males. They are mostly on the rocky edges of the East Lake areas of Mason Regional Park in Irvine. Given the small population size, but has a big emphasis on other species here, but given the small population size of adult Mason bullfrogs, I wonder what maintains their population size. Large numbers of eggs and tadpoles produced, but offset by the presence of African clawed frogs on a coming video, which do eat smaller bullfrog tadpoles and juveniles, bullfrog cannibalism, dispersal of older bullfrogs into Mason Lake area, or some factors that are presently not in evidence. So I want to say one last thing about my photography here. All my photos and videos were captured using Nikon Super Zoom cameras, the B700, the P950 that I recently got, or my Nikon P1000. The subjects were not disturbed or artificially attracted to my position. I handheld the camera for most of the photo shoots. So that's, it's not rock solid. The media has only been edited for some cropping or zooming in and adjustments to contrast and brightness. I hope you enjoyed that. This has been another of my JDW talks. I have YouTube talks on genealogy topics, census, Ellis Island, immigration, and naturalization. And then I have more topics on natural history topics, virtual birding field trips, optics, birding optics, California birds, and Mason Park nature notes, and then some miscellaneous. So come join the 1,000 other people who subscribe to my YouTube channel. And with that, go out and take a look at Mason, and I hope that I'm giving you some nature interpretation here to make it easier to understand the dynamics. And keep your eyes open. You might see adult American bullfrogs. Bye-bye.